Share of the Adani Energy Group has been charged in the United States over an alleged multi-billion-dollar bribery scheme.
A U.S. court indicted representatives of the Adani Group.
The United States that has now charged billionaire Gautam Adani with an indictment.
Welcome back, everyone. So today we'll be talking about Adani Green Energy Limited, which is a highly controversial stock. And in this video, we'll discuss how they make money, the valuations, future projects, and the associated risks with the stock. So if you look at the company, Adani Green is India's largest listed renewable energy company, and they're backed by some really prominent investors such as Total Energies and Qatar Investment Authority Fund. So what exactly do they do? Well, they create solar parks, wind parks, and hybrid uh, plants wherein they produce power and then they sell this electricity to state distribution companies as well as the government and other companies through something called PPAs, which are power purchase agreements. These basically provide them they provide them stable, predictable revenue streams, and also it allows them to take loans on these contracts, which is why they have a lot of debt to kind of fund expansion and increase their capacity of these projects as well. And here we can see kind of four um, customers you could say that this company has, which is central government agencies, state distribution companies, commercial and industrial, as well as corporate players, and merchant and spot market, which is extremely small, makes up just 1 to 3% of their entire revenue, right? And if you look at the future projects, they're getting into some interesting stuff, such as green hydrogen. Not directly, but they'll be supplying Adani New Industries Limited electricity to produce hydrogen. And when clean electricity is used to produce hydrogen, that's termed as green hydrogen. And there are various types of hydrogen. So this is that. And then they're also um, building out the renewable energy park in Gujarat, which is going to be massive. It's 30 gigawatts planned by 2029. And the most interesting thing I would say is the energy storage. They're working on something called PSP, which is a pumped storage project, and BESS, which is a battery energy storage system. And this will basically allow them to store electricity and then deploy it whenever the price of electricity is high and demand is high. And they're also working on certain hybrid corporate projects, such as recently they had a contract with Google to supply electricity to the data centers. And this is important because it kind of sets the bar there that they'll basically in the future be supplying they can potentially supply other data centers that set up in India, because a lot of the companies that are going to set up data centers will require clean energy instead of energy produced by coal, because they do have certain standards and certain ethical guidelines that they want to meet. So this will be beneficial for them. And what I realized in their 2025 presentation was that they're moving away from their model of these 25-year fixed purchase power agreements, wherein they lock in a certain price for 25 years to supply electricity and they get stable revenue. And they're moving towards a shorter duration timeline of supplying electricity. And if you look at their con calls and you really understand what they're trying to do here, they say that they want to basically increase margins and get a higher return by doing this. Because if you look at what they're doing here, they are really they're using the battery systems to make more money by not selling it during the hours when electricity is cheap, and then selling it during the hours when the electricity is expensive, and that will allow them to make a lot more profit essentially. And something also called CFD is mentioned here that's not there in 2025, which is a contract for difference. It's basically just a financial instrument that um, allows them to participate in the market and not lose too much money if the price drops, but they still have stable enough revenues. But essentially, they're making more money than they would with these 25-year PPAs. So now let's talk about the BESS, which is the battery energy storage systems. So essentially, these are just batteries, large scale batteries, wherein, as you can see, during the middle of the day, this dash line is demand. So the demand peaks during the middle of the day, but the thing is, because the solar power also peaks during the middle of the day, because the sun is right overhead, that's when you get the maximum amount of solar energy. That causes there to be an oversupply, and so the price of electricity, ironically, when demand is highest, the price of electricity is the lowest. So their solution to this is, by implementing a battery system, they can essentially store the electricity during this time and not sell it at a cheap price. And then later in the evenings, when there's no solar and the demand is high but the price is also higher, they can basically discharge their batteries and get a higher price for it. And now let's talk about the hydro PSP, what exactly it is. So their hydro pumped storage project is, well, they put a really nice picture here, wherein there's a lower reservoir and an upper reservoir. And what they do is, during the hours when they want to charge the batteries, in this system, they supply the electricity to pumps located here, and it pumps the water from this lower reservoir to this upper reservoir. And then when they need the electricity, they basically release this water, and it comes flowing down, spins some turbines here, and provides them electricity for use, and then they can sell it whenever they need it. And they're already doing this in 5 states. Like, they'll be doing this in 5 states, and they're planning to have 5 gigawatts by 2030. Now let's talk a bit about the valuation. So the price to earnings ratio of Adani Green is 76. At the start of the year, it was 90. So it is more reasonable now, but it's still trading above all its peers. But if you look at historically, it's been, the median has been 216. So it's substantially below its median PE. And if you look, its earnings have never been higher. So they currently have the highest earnings they've ever had, and the PE is the lowest it's ever been, right? Before I get to the valuation, I took the WACC from Bloomberg, which is the weighted average cost of capital, and it was 11.5. This is important because once I explain the model, um, it is going to be important for that explanation. So I don't really want to go into how exactly I made this model, because that would take a lot of time. I can make a separate video on that if you guys want. But essentially, what I found was that the company is overvalued by a lot, because the value per share is 270 rupees, whereas the current value of the share is 983 as of today. And so yeah, it is highly overvalued, and I have taken the WACC as 11.5, as I said before. And if you put the same thing, if you put, you can put 11 as a discount rate in alpha spread, which also calculates the DCF. They also got a similar value of around 261. Ours was 270. So in the base case, it's pretty similar. The worst case for this is 76, and best case is 908 rupees. So they also think it is overvalued in any scenario, right? Um, so now let's move on. Why I think people really like this company is because of the speed and scale at which they operate. Because they have a lot of sister companies, and being part of the Adani group really helps them a lot. They have better cost efficiencies compared to, independent energy companies, because they have some companies who supply them parts and, solar modules and wind turbines. And then also, the Adani group owns certain transmission companies as well as infrastructure companies, that essentially allows them to speed up the process whenever they want to expand capacity. And then, more importantly, they have predictable revenues because they supply electricity to a lot of their own companies, right? Like the one that produces green hydrogen, ANIL, as well as a company that's coming up called Adani Koni X, which is Adani Con X, which will basically make data centers. And this, I believe, will be a huge theme in the future. And so this will be really positive for them. And so they know they'll have stable revenues if they're supplying electricity to their own companies, right? And another thing is that this company is of strategic importance because they have such a high capacity. Um, they kind of intertwined with India's energy goals and also with their um, energy security. So I think people think that this company will not fail or cannot fail because of its strategic alignment with India's goals, right? And also that the government has a vested interest in making sure that this company succeeds and India's renewable energy targets are met. So that definitely is a positive. And then there's also policy support from the government for the industry in general. The government is obviously building transmission and renewable hubs to increase demand, and then they provide subsidy for solar parks, as well as you know the wind projects that they have and the hybrid projects they have, the hydro projects, and that kind of keeps their cost down and increases the returns. And also the PLI scheme, uh, which helps in production, right? Another thing I came across was that the price for electricity seems to be decreasing in recent years. There are some analysts whose reports I read who say that it potentially might increase, but I think energy prices are harder to forecast into the future. So I've some of them I've taken as stable um, in my revenue projections, right? When I calculated it. But even if the average realization is decreasing, Adani Green Energy is growing its top line revenue at such a large pace that I think they'll be able to offset any reduction in average realization. This I think is the most important thing to discuss, which is the risk consideration, because they do have certain legal cases against them, and this can cause wild swings in the stock price. So, firstly, let's talk about the most important current case against them, which is the criminal and civil action, which is involves Gautam Adani, Sagar Adani, and uh, Vineet Jain, which is a $250 million bribery schemes. We'll discuss this in greater detail. The next one is alleged dumping of crystalline silicon solar modules. In India, there was a um, insider trading case against them, which recently came out that they've been cleared of. There was some misclassification of imported goods to evade custom duties, and then there was misuse of entities for related party transactions, which I think was the most famous case. Happened because of Hindenburg, right? I think everybody's heard about the Hindenburg report. So luckily, SEBI has cleared them of any wrongdoings, and said that the Hindenburg report and any wrongdoings mentioned in that, they're all cleared of. So no problem there. They were recently cleared of the insider trading case as well this year. So that was definitely a positive. But the US case is still ongoing. So let's kind of discuss what is the US case. So the US says um, that these Adani Green officials kind of bribed some Indian government officials to secure lucrative solar energy contracts. And then they're saying that because they raised money from US investors and they were associated with some US companies, that they have defrauded US investors. Something I find particularly funny is that they say that they misled investors because they didn't mention that they bribed um, Indian officials. Because, I mean, if you bribe Indian officials, why would you mention it in your documents? right? But anyways, that's the case that they have against Adani Green. And then obstruction of justice, and fourth, this is important, remember this, violations of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, FCPA. So they basically say that because of this act, because they're associated with a company in the US that's listed on the stock exchange, they can go after the Adani Group for defrauding investors. So we'll come back to this later when I explain why I added Adani Green Energy to my 2025 portfolio. So let's go over the shareholding pattern for now. The promoter shareholding has actually increased from 60.75% to 61.91%. And that's mainly because there's a holding company, Ardor Holdings, also owned by the Adani Group, which has actually increased its stake in the company, which is a positive, because either they believe that the company is going to do well or they didn't want the stock price to decrease. Either ways, it seems to be positive. The public shareholding has remained stable, but the foreign institutional investors have actually decreased their shareholding, which is a bit worrying. But if you look at the overall trend, foreign institutional investors have been pulling money out of India because the depreciation of the rupee, and potentially in this case could be that they are under investigation for a case in the US. So maybe, foreign investors are spooked and they don't want to be investing in a company that might have potential issues. Now let's kind of discuss the stock price movement because this kind of tells the story, right? So up till 2022, everything was fine, but in uh, Jan of 20th Jan 2023, because of the Hindenburg report, it created a lot of fear and uncertainty, which led to a decline of 75%, and the stock price reached 500, and then it stabilized at around 1,000 rupees. And then finally, when they were cleared by SEBI for any charges mentioned in the Hindenburg report, and they also came up with their own rebuttal. If you have time, you can read both the Hindenburg report and the rebuttal. It led the stock to rally 105%, and then it stayed at about 1800, around that level. And then finally, when the US came up with their case, it led to the stock price again then decreasing by about 61%. So that's kind of the story here. And I went on Bloomberg and I found out that 85% of the analysts say that it's a buy, and one says that it's a sell. So it appears till like 1800 rupees. Most analysts thinks that this company is a buy. Again, this is not financial advice. I'm not telling you to invest or buy a stock or sell a stock. So please do your own research before you make any investment decisions, right? So these are some of the key insights mentioned on Bloomberg. Um, Probably this is important. Consensus price target is 36.5% higher than the current stock price. That's definitely good because even my target price was 30% higher when I kept this for my 2025 portfolio that I'm paper trading, right? And then yeah, as I mentioned before, Ardor Holdings had the largest purchase, um, which is their holding company, right? Now, why did I add it to my 2025 portfolio, and why hasn't it, played out as I thought it would? It's kind of remained flat the whole year, right? I mean, there were some spikes in the middle, but let's discuss that. So I thought that they would beat earnings expectations firstly, which they did, and you can read this Mint article which mentioned that they beat street estimates, and the stock jumped 14%, but then it kind of declined back to where it was before. And I think that could also be because Total Energies is kind of selling their stake in this company to recoup their initial investment. They're not completely exiting it, but they also mentioned that they wouldn't be partnering up with this company for any new projects till they're cleared of the investigation, which I think makes sense. I also expected them to be absolved of all criminal and civil charges in the US and India. And while in India there is a case that they were absolved of, these charges. In the US, they still haven't made any progress. I thought this would cause change in sentiment, and then the stock would rally, but it hasn't happened. So let's kind of discuss why I thought this would happen. So firstly, Donald Trump paused the FCPA, which is the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, and this is the same act under which Adani was charged, right? If we go back to their case, yeah, here, the violation of the Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, which says that if you are connected to a US company that's listed on the stock exchange, then they can basically prosecute you if you've done anything illegal in your country. And he's basically paused this act. So this basically weakens their case against Adani Green. And then another positive, I think, is that even a year after um, they wanted to serve summons to Gautam Adani, they've been unable to. And this, I think, is positive because it gives them more time to kind of build a legal defense. And delaying is not negative for them in any way, right? This article was about how they've been cleared of any insider trading investigation charges. And then this is the most interesting article that I found. And it's the main one that I based why I thought that the charges would be dropped or, reduced, and they wouldn't have a dramatic effect on the stock price. So it basically here, there's a Republican lawmaker who's posing several questions to uh, the people that are prosecuting Adani Green, and he's saying that why are you seeking to enforce justice in India, and why are you basically um, pursuing a case that will spoil the relationship with India and the US. And if you read this whole article, it basically goes on to say that the previous administration might have wanted to, leave the new administration in a lurch and cause some conflict between India and the US. And since he is the Republican and so is Donald Trump, it kind of usually these people have similar ideologies. So that kind of indicated that they may not be so interested in kind of pursuing this case. And that's what I based my thesis on, like these three things. And so far, however, if you look at 1 year, it's remained flat. I mean, obviously the spikes here uh, because of the earnings beat, but yeah, that's about it. It's stayed flat. So yeah, I just wanted to do a fundamental analysis on the stock and explain my reasoning for why I bought it and how it's currently doing. So yeah, thank you. And if you have any questions or comments or you want to discuss something, you can like email me or just comment down below, and that would be great. So yeah, thank you for watching.